This Sunday marks Remembrance Day in our church, when we recall the armistice of November 1918 that brought an end to the First World War. The book of Ecclesiastes reminds us that there is a time for war and a time for peace. This does not glorify war. It reminds us, though, that war is sometimes a necessary part of life. And on Remembrance Day, by recalling the heroic deeds of the past, we are not glorifying war, but we are remembering, honouring and respecting those who gave their lives, the ultimate sacrifice, so that their friends could live. And their friends may turn out to be people whom they couldn't have known, people who lived generations later. But their generosity is recalled. Like many people in Northern Ireland and in all of Ireland and elsewhere too, I have family members who perished in the First World War. On my mother's side, my grandmother's older brother died in a prison of war camp just a short time before that armistice of 1918. On my father's side, my grandfather's older brother, Albert, also died. He was killed fighting at the Somme. My grandfather, his younger brother, was a bit economical with the truth when it came to his age, signed up when he was very young, and he too was reported missing and believed dead, but thankfully he turned up at the end of the war, and I have fond memories of him. On my mother's side again, her father died prematurely in his early 40s, not during the war, but it was always believed as a consequence of the effects that the First World War and his experiences then had on his health and on his constitution. That was a sad time, of course. I don't remember him. I never knew him. He died years before I was born. But I can recall him and remember him on many occasions, and especially on Remembrance Day. Once I asked my mother about my father's experiences on D-Day, because I knew that he had fought there. His military records, if I remember correctly, suggest that he too was economical with the truth, because his date of birth is recorded as being a year before it actually was. But he did fight on D-Day, and when I asked my mother about it, she said that it wasn't really D-Day itself, it was the day before, because he was a member of the Royal Ulster Rifles Airborne Division who went into France the night before D-Day, charged with cutting communications. His job, I think, was to help to blow up a bridge. So I can remember him. He went on after the war to continue serving in the army and fought in what was then called Palestine. And when he died at an even earlier age than my grandfather, my mother again considered that it was as a consequence of his experiences during the war that his life was brought to such a premature end. So when we think of Remembrance Day, perhaps there are very few of us now who actually remember anyone who saw active service in the Great War at the beginning of the last century. But we recall and remember what they did. We recall and remember their sacrifice. We recall and remember their generosity, their heroism. And we might think too of others who perhaps didn't fight in the theatre of war, but who nonetheless made a great contribution to our freedom and to the way that we now live our lives. One name that comes to mind here among the many is the name of Alan Turing, who was such a great contributor to decoding, de-encrypting messages that so helped to bring about the end of the war. He went on to work, of course, in computer science. His work wasn't altogether acknowledged when he was alive, in part largely because of the secrecy surrounding some of it. But we might also remember that he was what was then called a homosexual, living a way of life that was actually illegal. We've learned compassion, we've learned to change, we've learned to think about things differently, and his name is now honoured too, among the others. And so this Sunday we remember. We recall what happened, not because we want to glorify violence, but because we don't want to forget the sacrifice of those who have done so much for us.